Hey guys, tonight we're moving in for a week with one of the most quietly relentless labor systems in American history. The mid-century suburban housewife's 6-day schedule, a 70 to 80 hour unpaid shift governed by rigid calendars, scalding water, a £19 vacuum cleaner, and the unspoken social contract that all of it should look effortless. Not glamour, not pearls and a smile. A tin of bacon drippings next to the stove, and a percolator that needs cleaning before you've had a single sip. If you've been watching for a while, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this kind of quietly damning, suspiciously specific historical reckoning. And big thanks to whoever requested this topic in the comments. I hope your kitchen is quiet right now and that no appliance currently wants anything from you. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is. Wherever you are, it tends to be roughly 2 a.m. somewhere on this map, and a fair number of you are folding laundry while listening, which feels spiritually appropriate. Dim the lights, set a fan running in the background for white noise, settle into the pillow, and pull the blanket all the way up, because after tonight, you will never look at a casserole dish the same way again. Have you ever wondered what 70 hours of unpaid work actually looks like broken down into a Monday through Saturday schedule that somebody printed in a magazine and expected you to follow? Why did ironing pillowcases become a moral position? How did you carry 35 pounds of groceries home on foot from 3 separate stores with a toddler who has opinions about the route? Could you survive a kitchen that regularly hit 90 degrees in summer, had no dishwasher, and required you to be fully dressed in nylons and heels while operating it? What exactly was happening when 36 million prescriptions for something Time magazine called Don't Give a Damn pills went mostly to suburban housewives in a single year? Did the ironing board ever actually get put away, or did it just live in the kitchen like a piece of furniture nobody talked about? The defrost ritual, the one where you put pans of hot water inside the freezer and waited 45 minutes. Who decided that was just a task? Congratulations. You've just woken up in Levittown, New York, 1953. It is 5:28 a.m. The percolator is already on the counter waiting. Your hair is in pin curls under a sleep net because the salon appointment isn't until Thursday and the set has to last. The house cost $7,990 and the kitchen faces the backyard, which was a selling point. Good luck. You wake at 5:30 a.m. There's no alarm. There hasn't been an alarm in years, because the schedule has trained your body better than any clock ever could. The husband is still asleep beside you, breathing the slow, steady breath of a man who will be handed coffee in 35 minutes. You sit up quietly. You reach for the house dress folded on the chair. You don't turn on the bedside lamp. The day starts now. The house dress isn't glamorous. It isn't meant to be. It's a cotton garment engineered specifically for the task of existing inside a house when nothing is finished and everything is slightly wet. You reach for it the way you reach for everything at this hour, by feel, by memory, by the silent agreement you and the chair made years ago. The house dress, the slipper, and the small wooden mushroom you use for darning are arranged on the chair in roughly the order you will need them, which is the order you have always needed them. You smooth it down, locate your slippers by feel, and move toward the kitchen the way a sailor navigates a known ship in the dark, by memory, by muscle, by the knowledge that the third floorboard announces itself. The kitchen is cold, not dramatically cold. 2. Just the specific cold of a room that's been unoccupied for 8 hours and is about to be asked to do a great deal. You light the gas burner with a match. The stove doesn't start itself because it's 1952 and the stove has no opinions about convenience. The percolator goes on next. It'll take 12 minutes and it'll let you know how it's doing the entire time, gurgling its small wet report every 9 seconds, like a co-worker who updates you constantly without ever saying anything useful. Breakfast isn't toast. Not in this kitchen, not in this decade. Betty Crocker's picture cookbook which sold 1 million copies and sits on your counter with the authority of a legal document, has opinions about breakfast. It wants eggs. It wants bacon. It wants fresh squeezed orange juice, which is a task that requires both hands and a level of morning optimism you're still building toward. The whole production takes 30 to 45 minutes of active work. This is before 7 a.m. This is before you've spoken to another human being. This is before the coffee is finished. A tin can of bacon drippings sits next to the stove. It's been there so long, it's essentially furniture. You spoon a measure into the pan, and the fat goes translucent at the edges, and the kitchen begins to smell like every morning that has ever happened in this house. The smell is warm, salty, and faintly accusatory, as if even the fat has noticed you haven't sat down. The smell is present, warm, purposeful, a little demanding. Meanwhile, your hair is still in pin curls from the night before, covered by a sleep net, which is exactly as dignified as it sounds. You'll take it down later, before the neighbours appear, because appearing undone is a different kind of emergency. Margaret Hooper, 3 doors down, once answered her door with her rollers in and Mrs. Patterson told someone, and that someone told someone else, and the information travelled the full length of Elm Close within 40 minutes, which is faster than the evening news and considerably more local. The percolator finishes. You pour a cup. You don't sit down. Sitting down at this stage is basically a philosophical position, and you don't have time for philosophy before 6 a.m. The eggs go in. The bacon goes in. The toast goes in. 4 separate things requiring 4 separate kinds of attention, which is basically the original multitasking certification program, except there's no certificate, and the evaluation is whether anyone complains at the table. By 6:15, the plate is ready. The coffee is poured. The juice is squeezed. The husband comes downstairs in his work shirt, sits down, picks up the newspaper, and begins to eat. He doesn't comment on the eggs. He doesn't not comment on the eggs. He reads the paper. You stand at the counter with your own cup and drink it while the children begin to stir upstairs, and the day, which started at 5:30 in a cold kitchen with a match and a tin of drippings, formally begins. You walk to the kitchen in slippers. The percolator is sitting on the stove where you left it last night, washed and dry and lid off, because the percolator must be cleaned every single day or the coffee oils accumulate inside the basket and turn rancid. You add fresh water, you measure the grounds, you set it on the burner. The flame catches with a soft whump. Then you stand there and wait for the gurgling to begin, because the gurgling tells you the day has officially started. The gurgling takes about 9 seconds per bubble. You know this. You didn't decide to know this. You just do. The way you know which floorboard announces itself outside the baby's room, and which burner runs hot, and which drawer sticks in humid weather. The percolator is not your appliance. It's your co-worker. It has opinions about the temperature, and it communicates them slowly, one wet sentence at a time. The gurgles, the smells, and the slow climbing whistle of the kettle behind it are basically the morning's 3-part harmony performed live every day for an audience of nobody. While it percolates, you start the eggs. The bacon drippings tin is already on the counter. It's always on the counter. A squat little can of repurposed grease that functions as the household savings account, except for fat. You don't throw out bacon drippings in 1953. You store them at room temperature next to the stove like a family pet, and every morning you spoon a little out into the pan, and the pan hisses, and the kitchen fills immediately with a smell that is somewhere between breakfast and a decision you can't take back. Betty Crocker's Picture Cook book has allocated 30 to 45 minutes for this entire production. The book has sold over 1 million copies. Nobody has complained about the timeline in print. The eggs go in. The toast goes in the toaster, which is a chrome 2 slicer that must be watched because the lever mechanism is optimistic about its own abilities. Foul. The orange juice requires a manual glass juicer and 4 to 6 oranges depending on the oranges. which have no contract with you regarding their juice yield. You squeeze them anyway. Your wrists know the motion. It's a small, repetitive, faintly biblical act, pressing fruit until something gives. Let's talk about what you look like while doing this. You're in a house dress. It has a collar. Your hair is set from last night. Pin curls under a sleep net. And you've already removed the net and smoothed everything out because the neighbourhood has eyes. And the kitchen window faces the backyard. And the backyard has a fence. And the fence has neighbours. Margaret Hooper has been up since 5. You know this because her kitchen light was already on when you came downstairs. You don't know what she's cooking. It smells involved. A real percolator breakfast, coffee, eggs, bacon, toast, fresh squeezed orange juice is basically a short order diner ticket executed by one person with no ticket system and a husband who would like everything ready before he leaves at 7. The diner would charge you $4 and give you a table. You get a kitchen that currently reads 82 degrees with the stove on and no cross breeze, because only 12% of American homes have air conditioning in 1950, and yours isn't one of them. Ruby Ellsworth, 3 houses down, burnt her first batch of toast this morning because her youngest woke up crying at the exact moment the toaster needed attending. The toast made its feelings known. You heard it. You registered it the way you register all sounds in the house simultaneously. Children, appliances, husband moving upstairs, running a kind of background audio analysis that no one has named yet because it isn't considered a skill. It's just what mornings are. The percolator reaches full bubble. The coffee is ready. You pour a cup for him first, because the cup needs to be there when he comes downstairs at the right temperature, which is hot but not scalding, which is a difference of about 4 minutes and requires a judgment call you make correctly almost every day. Almost. You haven't had a sip yet? Ham jabba sivio. The bacon is still in the pan. The toast is up. You start breakfast at 6 a.m. The Betty Crocker picture cookbook on the shelf has assigned you 45 minutes for this, and not a minute less. There are eggs to fry, toast to brown, oranges to squeeze, and a pound of bacon to render in the cast-iron pan that has been seasoned by your mother and her mother before her. Nothing in this breakfast comes out of a box. The orange juice is orange juice, because you have just squeezed it. The oranges don't cooperate. They never cooperate. You press each half down onto the glass juicer with both hands, and rotate, and the juice runs into the pitcher with seeds you'll have to fish out individually, because the strainer is somewhere behind the percolator, and the flour tin and the tin can of bacon drippings that lives permanently next to the burner like a family heirloom. The can has no lid. It doesn't need one. It's been open since March. The bacon goes in first. Cast iron requires patience, a certain tolerance for noise, and a forearm willing to be a target. It hisses, it pops, it sends a small column of fat sideways onto your forearm, and you don't react, because this is Tuesday, and it did the same thing on Sunday, and it'll do it again Thursday. A grease splatter on the arm is just punctuation at this point. You tilt the pan slightly to pull the fat toward one side, the way your mother showed you, the way her mother showed her, the way no one thought to write a manual for, because it was assumed the knowledge would simply transfer woman to woman, like debt. The eggs come next. You crack them one-handed into the pooled drippings, which is the kind of skill that sounds impressive until you realize you developed it because you don't have a free hand. The yolks sit up high and round. If they break before they hit the pan, that's a bad morning. They haven't broken. Not today. A toast is its own negotiation. The chrome toaster on the counter runs on its own internal logic, which does not align with your schedule. You put 2 slices in, you watch them, you turn slightly to check the eggs. The toaster ejects both slices with a sound like a small, efficient tribunal reaching a verdict. You butter them standing up, pressing down with the knife, because the bread is already cooling and cold butter won't spread without commitment. Dorothy Marsh, 2 streets over, has one of the new pop-up toasters with an adjustable timer. She mentioned it at the Tuesday Mending Circle, the way someone might mention they'd recently acquired a small piece of real estate. You don't have one. Yours has a lever and a preference for burning the left slice slightly more than the right, which is basically a personality defect, and you've been working around it for 3 years. The whole operation, eggs, bacon, toast, juice, coffee already percolating on the back burner, runs about 42 minutes. The eggs are warm, glossy, and slightly indignant about being moved. You haven't sat down. You haven't eaten. The coffee cup in front of your husband's chair is full. The one at your place at the table is empty because you haven't gotten there yet, and by the time you do, he'll be backing the Chevrolet out of the driveway, and the children will be awake, and the pan will need scraping, and the tin can will need topping up with whatever fat the bacon just produced. The drippings go in warm. The tin receives them without comment. It's seen everything. You pack the husband's lunch at 7:15 a.m. The lunchbox is metal and weighs more empty than most modern phones. Inside you've layered 2 sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, an apple, a small piece of pie in its own wax paper packet, and a thermos of coffee with the lid screwed tight enough to survive a car door. You hand the lunchbox to him at 7:30. He kisses your cheek. He takes the only car the household owns. The driveway empties. The silence after the car leaves is a specific kind of silence. Not peaceful. Not earned. Just sudden. Like a refrigerator cycling off and you only notice because the hum is gone. Now the math begins. 60% of American households in 1950 own 1 car. Your household is part of that 60%. The butcher is 6 blocks away. The greengrocer is 8. The A&P is 11, which is roughly the distance a reasonable person would describe as a short drive and an unreasonable person would describe as a walk. You are about to become an unreasonable person, Sive. Today isn't Thursday. Thursday is marketing day, and we'll get there, but the car's absence is a permanent feature of every day that follows this one, so you might as well understand it now. The car doesn't live here. The car commutes. The sandwiches took 11 minutes. The bread, the butter, and the small judicious slice of ham are all things you can apparently do without thinking, which is convenient because nobody's offering you any thinking time before 7:30 a.m. This is not counted as cooking. Cooking is what you did before 7:15. Sandwich assembly is considered self-evident, the way IKEA considers the flat pack instructions self-evident, which is to say it assumes a competence the material does not quite support. The pie in the wax paper packet is left over from last night. You made it yesterday. 82% of housewives in 1955 prepared dessert 4 or more times per week, per the Ladies' Home Journal, which ran that survey without apparent irony. The pie isn't special. The pie is infrastructure. A woman named Carol Pritchard, 3 houses down, packs her husband's lunch in a paper bag. Just a bag. The neighbourhood has noticed this. Carol appears unbothered. Carol is possibly the most dangerous person on the block. The thermos gets rinsed and dried before it goes in the box. The lunchbox gets wiped down with a damp cloth. These are not steps you invented. These are steps that exist because the alternative, a sticky thermos, a gummy latch, a faintly cheesy lid, is not a neutral outcome. A sticky thermos is the kind of thing that gets mentioned at dinner. Dinner is still 9 hours away. You are already managing its reputation. You stand at the kitchen window for a moment. The Levittown kitchen faces the backyard. This was deliberate. The architects positioned it this way so you could watch the children while you cooked, which is the 1950s version of multitasking, and also the 1950s version of not being allowed to look away. The backyard is empty right now. The children are still asleep. The window shows you a square of dewy grass and a clothesline that doesn't have anything on it yet, but will. Monday is coming. Monday is always coming. Your coffee cup is still empty. It was empty when your husband left. It has been empty since 5:47 a.m. when you started the percolator for him. The percolator doesn't know this is unfair. The percolator just gurgles, pleased with itself, radiating the faint smugness of a task completed for someone else. You watch the car turn out of the driveway, and you are now stranded. 60% of American households in 1950 own exactly one car, and that car is currently leaving for the office at 15 miles an hour with your husband behind the wheel. The bus stop is a mile away. The grocery store is 2. The doctor is 4. Whatever you needed to do today that required wheels, you are not doing today. Nothing else moves until 6 p.m. The neighborhood has a name for this condition. It doesn't call it anything. It's just Tuesday. 3 children are currently in various states of existing in the backyard, which you can monitor through the kitchen window because the Levittown architect specifically placed it there. This was presented to buyers as a thoughtful design feature. It is a monitoring station. Sadie, you're the monitor? The eggs are on the stove, and you haven't left the building. Let's talk about the geography of a stranded day. The town isn't built for walking. It's built for driving, which is a distinction that matters enormously when you're the one who isn't driving. Thursday is marketing day, which means separate trips to the butcher, the baker, the greengrocer, and eventually the A&P, which is basically Instacart except you are the cart, and also the driver, and also the bag. A family of 4 generates 20 to 35 pounds of groceries per week. Those pounds don't carry themselves. Your arms have opinions about this by Wednesday. Dorothy Marsh, who lives 4 houses down, has solved this by befriending Mrs. Elroy, whose husband works the night shift and therefore surrenders the car most mornings by 10. Dorothy arrives at Mrs. Elroy's door at 10:04 with a coffee cake she's made specifically for this purpose. It's small, glossy, and faintly bribey. And up to. It's small, glossy, and faintly bribey. Indeed. The coffee cake is the toll. Mrs. Elroy eats it in 2 days. Dorothy gets the Plymouth until noon. It's a perfectly functional barter economy, operating entirely in baked goods. And nobody has written it down anywhere, because writing it down would make it sound strange. Meanwhile, the bus is technically an option. The bus runs at 20-minute intervals, stops twice on Oak Street, and requires a transfer downtown to reach the pediatrician's office, which keeps hours from 9 to noon, and again from 2 to 4, which are 2 windows you can't both hit in a single trip without the transfer, a stroller, and a child who is cooperating, which is not a guarantee. The transfer costs a nickel. The child costs considerably more in ambient negotiation. You don't go anywhere. The neighbourhood comes to you, or it doesn't. The milkman arrives at 6 a.m. and leaves 2 bottles on the step without knocking. The bread truck comes on Tuesdays and Fridays. The jewel tea man comes once a month with coffee and spices and a catalogue, and you talk to him for 12 minutes, because he's the most interesting thing to come down the street all week. And that's not an insult to anyone. That's just the radius. The radius is small. It is small, walkable, and entirely yours. The radius is the house, the backyard, the 3-block walk to the neighbour with the Plymouth, and whatever you can carry back on foot before 3 p.m. when the oldest gets out of school and the afternoon shift begins. The car comes home at 6. You've left the property exactly once. You return to the kitchen at 7:35 a.m. The breakfast plates are stacked in the sink in 2 columns, scraped but unwashed. The cast iron pan is still warm, glazed in bacon fat. The percolator basket is full of used grounds that need to be emptied before the oil's set. You run the water comes out at 140 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough that you have stopped noticing. You take the bar of ivory and you begin. Fewer than 5% of American homes have a dishwasher in 1950. You are the dishwasher. You are also the rinse cycle, the drying rack, and the quality control department. The plates, the pan, and the percolator basket each have their own protocol, And you'd never write the protocols down, because writing them down would make the kitchen sound like a small unionized workplace. Dishes happen 3 times a day. After breakfast, after lunch if the kids are home, after dinner, and each session runs 20 to 30 minutes at water temperatures that would trigger an OSHA incident report in any commercial kitchen today. Your hands know this water. They've stopped complaining about it. That's not a good sign, but it's a practical one. The ivory bar sits in its dish next to the sink, slightly soft from yesterday. Some women use powdered Vel or Tide for dishes because it dissolves faster. The bar is slower, but it lasts longer. And lasting longer matters when you're operating on a fixed weekly allowance and the grocery ledger has opinions about luxury. The bar has opinions too. It keeps slipping. The cast iron pan gets its own treatment. You don't submerge it. You wipe it, scrub it lightly with a cloth, dry it immediately, and rub a thin film of lard back into the surface before it can rust. This takes 4 minutes. It feels like more. The pan is older than your marriage and will probably outlast both of you, which is either comforting or unsettling depending on the morning. The percolator basket goes under the tap next. Coffee oils, if left overnight, go rancid by the following morning, a fact your mother told you and her mother told her, and which the Silex company also mentions in their care instructions on page 3 of a pamphlet nobody reads until something goes wrong. You rinse it, invert it, tap it twice against the sink edge. The used grounds hit the basin in a wet clump. You collect them for the compost pile or, if it's a Thursday, the neighbour's rose bed. The neighbour's roses are spectacular. The neighbour doesn't ask why. Meanwhile, a small person has appeared in the doorway in pyjamas with a sock half off, holding a toy truck and looking at you with the focused attention of someone who has determined that you are personally responsible for all conditions in the universe. You hand her a piece of toast from the rack without breaking your scrubbing rhythm. She accepts it. She leaves. The sock is still half off. A note about the counter. It holds the draining rack, the Crisco tin, the bacon drippings can with its folded foil lid, the dish towel, the fruit bowl with 2 brown bananas in it, and whatever the children put down and walked away from this morning. The counter is 9 square feet of usable space, managing the entire food infrastructure of a family of 4. It is small, sticky, and quietly heroic. It doesn't complain. It just holds everything until something slides off. By 7:55 a.m., the sink is clear. The dishes are stacked and drying. Your hands are pink from the water, slightly tight at the knuckles. You dry them on the dish towel, which immediately needs washing again. The percolator is clean, refilled and ready for the mid-morning cup you'll make for yourself sometime around 10, assuming nothing goes sideways between now and then. Nothing will go sideways. Something will go sideways. You refill the kettle anyway, because the kettle is optimistic and you've decided to agree with it for now. You don't choose what to do today. The schedule chose decades ago, before you were born, in a series of women's magazine articles that calcified into law. Monday is laundry, Tuesday is mending, Wednesday is cleaning, Thursday is marketing, Friday is the dinner you have not yet decided. Saturday is baking, Sunday is church. A 1953 American Home Economics Survey found 78% of women still keep this calendar exactly. You are one of them. You don't remember being asked. Monday arrives with the wringer washer already waiting. It's electric, which sounds like progress until you understand what electric means here. It agitates the water for you, and that's roughly where the assistance ends. Each garment still goes through the rubber rollers by hand. You feed it in, the rollers squeeze, the water comes out the other side in a thin warm sheet. Sheets, shirts, blouses, socks, children's trousers. Cow. Then the whole pile starts again for the rinse cycle. The machine has opinions about buttonholes. The buttonholes always lose. Only 10% of homes have a dryer in 1955. Yours isn't one of them. Everything goes on the line, which is fine in June, and a full philosophical crisis in February. The line doesn't care. Ironing follows the laundry, not on the same day necessarily, but close enough that the ironing board lives permanently open in the corner of the bedroom, like a second piece of furniture. The Journal of Home Economics puts the average at 6 to 8 hours of ironing per week. That's not just shirts, that's pillowcases, handkerchiefs, children's underwear. Someone decided children's underwear needed creasing, and that someone did not do the ironing. Tuesday is mending, which is the domestic equivalent of doing your own IT support. A sock develops a hole, you don't throw it away. Clothing takes up 12% of the household budget, and 12% has opinions about waste. You find the darning egg, a small wooden mushroom, and slide it inside the sock to hold the shape while you weave new thread across the gap. The egg is small, smooth, and slightly judgmental, the way a thimble is judgmental, or a pincushion shaped like a tomato. It's meticulous, quiet work, and it goes on the pile with the button that fell off the school shirt, the hem that came loose on the good dress, and the trouser knee that gave out during something nobody is admitting to. Wednesday is cleaning. The Hoover Model 28 weighs 19 pounds, which is approximately the weight of a medium-sized child, except the child would eventually become self-propelled. The Hoover is heavy, loud and faintly resentful. You push it across every room. Then you sweep the kitchen. Then you mop. Then you get down on your hands and knees with a rag and a tin of paste wax and you do the floors the way floors apparently need to be done, which is directly, without machinery, using your own body as the mechanism. The wax goes on in small circles. Then it comes off in small circles. The floor is then suitable for being walked on and immediately dirtied, which will happen within the hour. It's basically a Sisyphus situation, except Sisyphus didn't also have to make lunch. Thursday is marketing. There's no Instacart. You are the cart. You're also the driver, the shopper, and the bag. The butcher is one stop, the baker is another, the greengrocer is a third, and then the A&P for the rest. The car left with your husband at 6:15, so this is all on foot, and by the end of it you're carrying 20 to 35 pounds of groceries, back along a route that does not shorten no matter how many times you walk it. The produce has views about being jostled. The eggs share those views. Dorothy Pratt, a neighbour 2 doors down, does a Thursday shop in a single loop, bakery last, so the bread doesn't get crushed. She adjusts the bag against her hip at the corner of Elm and Prospect with the practiced lean of someone who's done this calculation several hundred times. She doesn't stop walking while she does it. Saturday is baking. The Pillsbury Bake-Off started in 1949 with a $50,000 prize and drew over 100,000 entries annually, which is basically the Great British Bake-Off. Except the tent is your kitchen, it's 90 degrees, there's no Paul Hollywood, and the prize is mostly the satisfaction of having done it. You make the bread, sometimes a pie. The children stand close to the oven in winter, which solves 2 problems at once. It's Monday, which means it's laundry day, and that means you are standing in front of a Ringer washing machine with a basket of wet shirts at your feet. The agitator is going, the drum is heavy with water. When the cycle ends, you'll lift each garment one at a time and feed it between the 2 rubber rollers at the top, hand cranking the wheel that squeezes the rinse water out. There are 3 to 5 loads in this basket. Each load takes 45 minutes. The schedule for today has already accounted for 5 hours. The machine itself is not small. It stands about waist high, smells like warm rubber and soap, and has developed a personality over the years. Not a good one. The rollers have an opinion about collars, specifically that collars shouldn't make it through in one pass. A button left in the wrong position will crack. A sleeve folded wrong will come out twisted into something that resembles abstract sculpture more than clothing. Cotton shirts, woolen trousers, and the kind of starched doily that has outlived 2 presidencies, they all go through, and they all come out vaguely chastened. You've learned its preferences, the hard way. It does not apologize. A 1953 survey found 78% of American housewives did their laundry on Monday, not because Monday is particularly good for laundry, because the schedule said Monday, and the schedule was not a suggestion. It arrived through women's magazines, the way a terms of service update arrives today, dense, confident and already binding by the time you finished reading it. Now the water. The hot cycle runs between 140 and 160 degrees Fahrenheit, which is hot enough to kill bacteria and also hot enough to remind your forearms that you have forearms. You do not have rubber gloves. The rubber gloves exist, but they make the feeding through the rollers part harder, and the rollers do not wait while you adjust. Your hands are in the water. They have been in the water for a long time. By Tuesday, they will look like they belong to someone significantly older. A woman named Patty Kowalczyk has a system. She feeds shirts, collar first, slightly angled, 3 seconds of pressure, then releases and catches on the other side before the fabric has time to bunch. The motion is small, practiced, and faintly hypnotic. She does this without looking. She's watching her youngest through the window above the utility sink. He's been quiet for 2 minutes, which is never good. She catches the shirt. She doesn't catch the kid in time. He's in the garden eating something. She decides it's probably dirt. The washing machine costs somewhere between $150 and $250, which sounds reasonable until you understand that the automatic version, the one that doesn't require you to stand there feeding laundry through rubber rollers like a very slow pasta machine, costs $300 to $450. That's the equivalent of somewhere between $3,400 and $5 today. And then there's the drying situation. Only 10% of homes have a clothes dryer. The rest of the laundry goes outside onto the line, assuming it isn't raining, assuming the wind isn't coming from the direction that drops neighbours' chimney soot across everything. If it rains, the laundry comes back inside. It drapes over chairs, over door frames, over the radiator, over the 2 kitchen chairs you've pulled together into a system that the chairs clearly resent. The kitchen smells like wet cotton for the rest of the afternoon. Ironing starts before everything's dry, because if you wait until it's fully dry, you'll be ironing until Thursday. The ironing board is permanently set up in the corner because there is no point in folding it down. It lives there. It has a permanent address. The average woman in 1953 is ironing 6 to 8 hours per week. Pillowcases, handkerchiefs, tablecloths, your husband's shirts, your children's school clothes, things that will be dirty again before the crease has time to settle. 6 to 8 hours a week. That's a part-time job. Except the part-time job also involves a 19-pound vacuum cleaner, 3 scratch-cooked meals a day, and 3.1 children who don't know what a crease is for. You carry the basket of wrung-out clothes to the backyard. The clothes line is strung between 2 metal poles your husband installed in 1949. You have a bag of wooden clothespins clipped to your apron at the hip. You hang shirts by the shoulders. You hang trousers by the cuffs. You hang sheets folded once across the line so they don't drag on the grass. The sun is doing the work the dryer would do if you owned one, and you don't, because dryers are a luxury item in 1955. 10% of American homes have a dryer. Yours is not one of them. The Sears catalogue has one for $229, which is roughly what your husband makes in 6 weeks. And he has opinions about this math that he has not been asked to share but will be sharing over dinner. The line holds everything. A dress shirt needs to dry without creasing if you want it to iron flat later, which means you're already thinking about tomorrow's ironing while hanging today's wash. The sheets go on first because they need the most sun and the most air. Then the shirts. Then the children's clothes, smallest to largest, which nobody told you to do but which feels correct in the way that a lot of unpaid organizational systems feel correct when they are yours alone to maintain. A neighbour, Carol Dempsey, appears at the fence with her own basket. She clips a sock to her line with the focused expression of someone diffusing something. The clothespins on her apron are wooden, weathered and faintly conspiratorial. She has 4 children. You have 3. Neither of you mentions the sock count. You both know. The whole operation takes about 20 minutes if the wind is cooperative. The wind is not always cooperative. A fitted sheet that catches a gust becomes, briefly, a structural problem, the kind that requires both hands. A dropped clothespin, a mild oath, and starting over. The sheet doesn't apologise. It's a sheet. It doesn't have that kind of self-awareness, and yet the line works. In summer, a full load dries in 2 to 3 hours in direct sun. In spring it's 4 to 5 hours, assuming no clouds, no rain, and no neighbour burning leaves upwind. There's always a neighbour burning leaves upwind. The clothes come back in smelling of fresh air, and occasionally someone else's bonfire, which is basically the 1955 version of scented dryer sheets, except it costs nothing, and you didn't choose it. You'll make 2 trips out here today. One to hang, one to retrieve. The retrieval is faster, but involves more folding judgment. What goes directly into the ironing pile? What can be folded straight to the drawer? What needs to be pressed right now before it sets into the kind of wrinkle that requires actual effort? The tablecloth always needs pressing. The tablecloth has always needed pressing. The tablecloth will always need pressing. It knows this about itself and has made peace with it. The ironing board is already set up in the utility room. It's been set up since Tuesday of last week. Taking it down would be an act of optimism that the week doesn't really support. You iron in the afternoon, after the wash has dried and been brought back inside. The ironing board lives permanently set up in the corner of the dining room because it has nowhere else to live and because you'll be back at it tomorrow. The Journal of Home Economics has measured the time required, and the answer is 6 to 8 hours per week. You iron shirts, you iron dresses, you iron tablecloths and napkins, you iron pillowcases, you iron handkerchiefs. The list is long, and the list does not negotiate. The iron itself weighs about 6 pounds, which doesn't sound like much until you've been moving it in small, firm strokes across broadcloth for 45 minutes straight. There's no steam setting. You fill a Coke bottle fitted with a sprinkler cap with water, and you sprinkle each item before you press it, because a dry iron on a dry shirt does nothing except make the shirt angry. The collar has to be done first, then the cuffs, then the back panel, then the 2 fronts, then the sleeves, in that order. The shirt is starched, structured, and faintly resentful of the whole operation. Your husband's shirts have an order. The shirt knows the order. You don't deviate. Let's talk about pillowcases. They don't wrinkle in any way that actually touches a human being. Nobody's face notices a wrinkled pillowcase. Nobody wakes up and says, "This sleep was compromised by inadequate pressing." And yet here you are, running a hot iron in a slow rectangle across cotton that will be slept on in 4 hours and will look exactly like a used pillowcase by morning. Handkerchiefs are their own category. Each one takes maybe 90 seconds, which sounds fast until you remember there are 12 of them, and then it's 20 minutes, and the 20 minutes is real. A woman named Dorothy Reese, 2 streets over, irons with the radio on. She keeps a glass of iced tea on the windowsill and moves it forward whenever the cord gets close. The cord is long, frayed, and quietly opinionated about being stepped on. She's ironed her husband's undershirts so many times she doesn't look at them anymore. Her hands just go. Dorothy irons like someone filling out a form she's memorized, efficient, accurate, and completely elsewhere in her mind. Children's clothes are the part nobody warns you about. A child's dress has gathers. Gathers have to be pressed around with the tip of the iron, slowly, because if you run the flat over them, you'll press them flat and they won't gather anymore, and the dress will look defeated. Your daughter is 4. She'll have the dress destroyed by 10:30 tomorrow. The iron doesn't know this. You press the gathers anyway. By 1953, this is still the system in 94% of American homes, which is basically a standing national appointment that nobody agreed to but everyone keeps. The Roomba won't exist for another 50 years. The permanent press fabric treatment that would reduce ironing by half won't arrive until 1964. You're 11 years early. The timing is not in your favour. The temperature in the kitchen was already high this morning. The dining room catches the afternoon sun. The iron puts out heat in a focused column, and the ironing board has no shade to offer. You work through it. The pile moves to the left, slowly, the way a very slow tide moves, and you keep the iron going in its small, sure strokes, and the shirts come out flat and correct and ready to be worn and wrinkled again by Tuesday. It's Tuesday, which means it's mending. You sit by the window with a wooden basket on your lap and a hole in a sock that belongs to a child. The darning egg is a small mushroom-shaped piece of polished maple, and you slip it inside the sock so the heel sits stretched over the rounded top. Then you weave new thread across the hole, one direction first, then the perpendicular. The repair takes about 11 minutes. The basket holds 5 more socks, waiting for the same operation. The darning egg doesn't have a brand. It came from someone's mother, who got it from someone's mother before that. It has the worn, confident smoothness of an object that has outlived every opinion anyone ever had about it. You turn it in your hand between socks, and it fits your palm like it was made specifically for your level of resignation. Now, the clothing budget. In 1953, the average American family spends 12% of household income on clothes, which, when you do the math on a $3,300 annual salary, is somewhere around $400 a year for every shirt, dress, school outfit, and pair of work trousers the family owns. That's roughly what a single dinner jacket costs today at Nordstrom, except you're covering 5 people and a baby and a husband who wants his collars kept crisp. So nothing gets thrown away. Everything gets fixed. The sock is not a sock you toss. It's a sock you negotiate with. A button comes next. Not lost buttons don't get lost in this house because you catch them before they go. You bite a length of thread, which is how everyone threads a needle in 1953, despite what any sewing manual says. The button goes back on a school shirt with a thread shank so it lies flat and doesn't pucker when buttoned. The shirt will survive another 18 months of school days at minimum. So you are, functionally, a garment conservator. Nobody calls it that. Tuesday's basket sometimes holds a dress hem that came loose, a trouser knee that needs a patch from matching fabric kept in a separate tin, a pair of your husband's work socks with a blister hole at the ball of the foot. Singer sewing machine sales hit 2 million units in 1950, and you understand why. The machine sits on its own table in the corner of the bedroom like a quiet, competent employee who never asks for a raise and never takes a day off. You feed fabric under the needle with both hands, and the rhythm of the foot pedal is, honestly, the most meditative 11 minutes of the week. Margaret Holloway, 3 doors down, has started buying ready-made blouses from the Montgomery Ward catalogue rather than sewing her own. People have noticed, not in a loud way, just in the way that a town notices when someone stops bringing pie to the church potluck. The blouses look fine. That's the problem. They look fine, and everyone can tell they're fine, and that's exactly the wrong kind of fine. A whole Tuesday basket, socks, buttons, one patch, a loose hem, takes somewhere between 90 minutes and 2.5 hours, depending on how complicated the patch is and whether a child wanders in to report that another child has done something requiring immediate arbitration. You don't stop mending during the arbitration. The darning egg stays in the sock. The thread stays taut. You sew the children's school clothes yourself, because the family is spending 12% of its income on clothing already, and 12% is what it costs to mend, alter, and supplement what the Singer in the corner produces. The Singer was bought in 1950. The year Singer sold over 2 million machines in the United States. You can hem a skirt in 15 minutes. You can replace a zipper in 20. A whole dress takes a Saturday morning. The pattern envelopes are stacked on the credenza in alphabetical order. The patterns are butterick, mostly, with a few McCalls for the girls' blouses. Each envelope has a woman on the front who looks completely relaxed about the whole situation. She's holding shears. She's smiling. She doesn't seem tired. Her hair is glossy, set, and entirely unaware of children. The illustration was done by someone who has never sewn anything on a deadline. You spread the tissue paper pieces across the kitchen table because it's the flattest surface you own, and the tissue immediately tries to drift. You weight the corners with a salt shaker, a jar of buttons, and one of the children, who has been told to hold still and isn't. The fabric is pinned. The pins go in at precise angles. One prick of the finger, and you move forward. This is not a situation that accepts pausing. The children's school clothes have to last. Not last until next season. Last until the seams physically give up, until the knees go, until a hem can't be lowered any further because you already lowered it twice. The math is straightforward. A store-bought dress for a 7-year-old runs about $4 at Sears, and the fabric to make the same dress costs 60 cents. That's not a hobby. That's a business decision with a sewing machine. A woman named Doris Schreiber, 2 streets over, makes her daughter's Easter dress every year from a single pattern, resized by hand, worn for 2 Easters, then cut down into a blouse for the 3rd. The dress doesn't know it's been repurposed. It cooperates fully. The boys are harder. Boys destroy things. A pair of trousers lasts approximately 6 weeks before the knees become a philosophical question about whether fabric can hold a grudge. You reinforce the knees before they go. This does not stop them from going. It just makes the eventual failure more dramatic. Pillsbury's Bake Off was pulling 100,000 entries a year from women competing for a $50,000 prize, which is basically the Great British Bake Off, except the judges are men in suits, and winning gets you a refrigerator. The sewing equivalent is less glamorous. Nobody's offering prize money for the fastest French seam. The prize is that your child goes to school wearing something with 2 sleeves. The singer runs for about 2 hours on a Tuesday afternoon. It's needle dropping at a rhythm that sounds like a small, extremely focused insect. The foot pedal is slightly sticky from the summer. You don't think about the summer. You press the hem flat with the iron, which is still out because the iron is always out, and you hang the finished pieces on the back of the pantry door to dry from the pressing. The pattern envelope goes back into the credenza. Alphabetical order. B comes before M. The children don't comment on this system because the children have learned not to comment on the credenza. It's Wednesday, which means deep cleaning, which means the Hoover Model 28 comes out of the closet. The Hoover weighs 19 pounds. You drag it from room to room by the handle, leaning into the weight on every push because a 1950s vacuum doesn't glide. A bike comes from yourself. The motor is loud enough that you can't hear the children through it. It growls, rattles, and emits a low harmonic note that the dog has learned to file a formal complaint about. The cord is long, but not long enough. I fair ease, hob, tummer, pards. You unplug. You move. You plug back in. You start over. The Hoover doesn't have attachments that clip on cleanly and stay there. It has attachments that clip on, suggest they'll stay there, and then fall off mid-hallway with a sound that startles the dog. You collect them from the floor and try again. The Hoover watches you do this with the indifference of a piece of equipment that's never once doubted its own importance. After the vacuuming comes the floors. Not mopping, not yet. First sweeping, then mopping, then waxing. The wax is Johnson's paste wax in a flat round tin, and it doesn't go on with a mop or a convenient squeeze bottle. It goes on with a rag, on your hands and knees, section by section, room by room. You buff it out the same way. This is basically a Peloton class, except the resistance is linoleum and the leaderboard is your mother-in-law's expression at Thanksgiving. So, Norma Lichtenberg, who lives 2 houses down and has 4 children under 9, keeps her wax tin under the sink next to the Ajax. She gets through it in about 6 weeks. She orders a replacement without mentioning it to anyone, because there is no system for mentioning it to anyone. The Ajax comes out for the bathroom. So, it's a chalky, bleach-adjacent powder that you shake directly onto the porcelain and then scrub in with a wet cloth until your knuckles turn pink. The tile grout requires a toothbrush, not a special grout brush sold on an end cap at Target. A regular toothbrush, repurposed. the way everything in this decade is repurposed. The chrome on the faucet needs polishing separately. The chrome has opinions about fingerprints. The chrome is unforgiving in a way that feels personal. And yet the bathroom isn't the longest part. The longest part is the refrigerator. Every 10 to 14 days, the icebox portion of your 9 cubic foot Frigidaire builds up a 1/4 inch of frost along the walls and needs to be defrosted manually. You empty the freezer shelf. You set pans of hot water inside it. You wait. You blot. You wait again. The process takes 45 minutes to an hour, depending on how aggressively the frost has committed to staying. It always commits. The frost is not a quitter. The whole operation is basically the same as a tech support call. You sit there doing small things and mostly just waiting for a system to stop being frozen. The kitchen floor gets waxed last because you've been walking on it all morning. You work backward toward the door so you don't step on the wet wax. You've done this enough times that you don't think about the logistics anymore. Your body just navigates it. A 1954 University of Connecticut study found the average housewife walked 10 miles a day inside and around her home. 10 miles, not brisk walk miles, not step-counted miles on a fitness app that congratulates you with a little badge. Miles accrued from the kitchen to the laundry line, from the laundry line to the vacuum, from the vacuum to the floor, from the floor to the bathroom, in a house that, from the outside, looked entirely peaceful. By 4 o'clock, the floors are dry, the chrome is gleaming, and the Hoover is back in the closet. You close the closet door. The closet door doesn't stick on Wednesdays. It knows better. You wax the kitchen floor on your hands and knees. The kitchen and the bathroom and the hallways are not carpeted, because carpet in those rooms would be impractical, and so the linoleum has to be swept, then mopped, then waxed, then buffed. The wax is paste wax, sold in a flat tin can. You apply it with a folded cotton rag. Then you wait for it to haze over. Then you rub it back to a shine. The job ends when the floor reflects the ceiling. The tin is Johnson's paste wax, and it has the faint chemical smell of something that is trying very hard to smell like nothing. By the second coat, the kitchen has filled with the sharp, resinous fume of solvent and pine, a smell that lives behind your nose for the rest of the day, and that paint stores will eventually charge $50 for in a candle. You open it with a butter knife, because the lid is sealed the way opinions are sealed, firmly and resistant to logic. The wax goes on thin, in small circular motions, like a grouting operation that nobody asked for. The rag gets cold quickly. Your knees get cold quickly. The linoleum doesn't care about either of these things. The floor is approximately 40 square feet of kitchen, which doesn't sound like much until you're doing it at arm's length, quadruped, with the rag going cold under your palm. You do this every week, not because anyone will comment on the floor's shine, because if you don't do it, the floor goes dull, and a dull floor reflects poorly on the woman who lives above it. The floor has opinions about your professional reputation, and it expresses them in the form of scuff marks. Norma Lichtenberg, 3 doors down, buffed hers to the point where her daughter slid across it in socks and removed a small section of baseboard. Norma did not slow down. She reattached the baseboard on Thursday. The buffing is where the wax earns its name. You switch rags, you push the haze back with short, firm strokes until the floor stops looking like a mistake and starts looking like a decision. This is basically the DIY equivalent of a professional floor crew, except the professional floor crew doesn't also have a pot of oatmeal on the stove and a child asking about a missing shoe. The oatmeal has been asking for attention for 4 minutes. You finish the corner first. The kitchen linoleum is typically a pattern, small diamonds or interlocking squares in 2 colours, cream and something that was optimistic about rust. The pattern exists to hide things. Grease. A dropped egg. The evidence of the previous hour. It's the interior design equivalent of a corporate press release. Once the kitchen is done, you move to the hallway. The hallway is narrower, which is worse, because your knees find the baseboards and the baseboards don't apologize. Then the bathroom threshold. Then the bathroom itself, which you've already scrubbed this morning from a standing position, but the wax doesn't care about the sequence of your suffering. The whole operation takes between 45 minutes and an hour, depending on how recently the floor was waxed and whether anyone tracked mud through it after the mopping, which someone did, because someone always does, and that someone doesn't know what a floor costs in units of Wednesday morning. When it's done, you stand up. Your knees make a sound. The floor shines back at you, blank and perfect and entirely indifferent to what it took. You move around its edge to get to the stove, because you've just waxed the middle and you're not walking on it yet. The oatmeal has formed opinions of its own. You clean the bathroom on Wednesday afternoon, after the floors. The standard product for the job is Ajax Cleanser, a chalky abrasive powder introduced in 1947 and marketed as the housewife's friend. You shake the can over the bathtub porcelain. The powder lands in a cloud that smells faintly of bleach. Then you scrub. There is no liquid spray version. There is no foam version. There is the powder, and the brush, and your hand, and the tile grout that has been absorbing soap scum since the previous Wednesday. Ajax doesn't dissolve. It doesn't foam reassuringly and rinse away clean like a Scrubbing Bubbles commercial promises things will go. It sits on the surface and waits for you to provide the mechanical force. You are the mechanism. You've always been the mechanism. You start with the tub. Your knees are already sore from the floor wax, which the floor did not thank you for, and you lower yourself back down onto the tile that is now aggressively shiny. The bathtub has a personality. It's not hostile, exactly. More like a colleague who doesn't acknowledge effort unless you really commit. You scrub in circles, small ones for the grout lines, wider ones for the flat porcelain. The powder turns grey as it lifts the soap residue, and you rinse it away in streaks, and then you do it again, because the first pass was optimistic. A woman named Dorothy Mabry has a method. She holds the scrub brush with two hands and works from the faucet end toward the drain, because gravity is the one free assistant she has. She rinses as she goes. She does not sing. She has tried singing. It doesn't help the grout. Then the sink, then the toilet, then the chrome fixtures, which require a separate cloth, because Ajax will scratch chrome if you're not careful, and chrome doesn't forgive scratches, and neither does the woman who sees the bathroom before you do every morning and has opinions about chrome. The chrome is small, bright, and embarrassingly susceptible to fingerprints. You polish the fixtures dry, so they don't water spot. The fixtures accept this without comment. The whole bathroom routine takes 40 to 50 minutes if nothing goes wrong. Something usually goes wrong. The drain is slow. The can runs out mid-tub. A child comes in and uses the sink you just dried. By 1953, there are cleaning products being marketed specifically to make this process feel like less of what it is. The ads show women in shirtwaist dresses, smiling at their own reflection in a freshly polished mirror. The women in the ads are clean, calm, and clearly off-duty. It's the kind of emotional relationship with bathroom surfaces that requires either excellent acting or medication. The medication is coming. Milltown arrives in 1955, and by 1957 doctors are writing 36 million prescriptions a year, mostly to women, and Time magazine calls them "Don't Give a Damn pills," which is in retrospect an extremely honest product description. You rinse the tub one more time. You stand up. Your knees have opinions about this transition, but they're not being consulted. The bathroom smells like bleach-adjacent powder and the particular silence that follows physical effort. You fold the cloth, set it on the edge of the tub, and look at what you've done. It looks clean. It'll look like this for about 4 days. It's Thursday, which means you go to the shops. Note the plural. The grocery run is not one stop in 1953. It's 4. The butcher has the meat. The greengrocer has the vegetables. The bakery has the bread. The A&P has the canned goods, the staples, and the soap. 4 stops, 4 small economies, 4 shopkeepers who already know what you'll order before your hand is on the door. Each store has its own line, its own shopkeeper who knows your name, and its own rhythm of small talk you are expected to maintain. The whole circuit takes about 3 hours. You haven't sat down since breakfast. The car is gone. It left at 7:15 with your husband inside it, and it won't be back until 5:45. 60% of American households in 1953 have one car. You know which 60% you're in. So, you walk, or you take the bus if the route runs close enough, and either way you're doing it with bags. By the end of the circuit, you're carrying 20 to 35 pounds of groceries on your person, which is basically a CrossFit farmer's carry, except the weight is a pot roast, and a week's worth of carrots, and there's no coach at the end, handing you a towel. The butcher is first. His name is Mr. Pellier, and he has opinions about chuck roast. He holds up a cut with both hands like he's presenting evidence at a trial, turning it slowly, explaining the marbling in a tone usually reserved for real estate. You nod. You've nodded at this cut before. The cut is fine. The cut has always been fine. You take the cut. At the greengrocer, you squeeze the tomatoes with a focus that would make a surgeon envious. You're building a mental map of the week. What gets used Tuesday, what holds until Friday, what the children will refuse regardless of preparation. This is not shopping, it's logistics. The tomatoes get squeezed again, just to be sure. The bakery smells like the best thing that has ever happened, which is inconvenient because you're on a schedule. Mrs. Kozlowski behind the counter wraps your loaf in paper and slides it across without being asked, because you've been coming in every Thursday since 1949, and the loaf doesn't change, and neither does the paper, and neither does Thursday. She asks about your youngest. You tell her he's fine. He isn't. He's fine enough. The A&P is last because it's heaviest. Canned tomatoes, shortening, dried beans, bar soap, a box of Ijax because Wednesday depleted the last of it. The A&P is the closest thing to a modern Costco this era produces, except it's the size of a large living room, and the fluorescent lighting has a personality disorder. You push a metal cart with a wheel that pulls left. The wheel has always pulled left. You compensate without thinking, the way you compensate for most things. By the time you're heading home, the bags have reorganized your shoulders. The bread is on top because it dents. The pot roast is on the bottom because it doesn't. You've walked a route that Yelp would describe as charming local shopping district, and you would describe as the same mile and a half I do every week with my arms full. A 1954 University of Connecticut study clocks the average housewife at 10 miles a day inside and around her home. Thursday is a contributing factor. You get back. You put everything away. The refrigerator is 9 cubic feet and has opinions about how much you've bought. Some of it won't fit. The reorganization takes 15 minutes and requires removing everything, assessing it like a crime scene, and rebuilding from scratch. The butter goes in front, because butter is urgent. The pot roast goes on the bottom shelf, where it will sit until tomorrow evening and think about what it's going to become. Dinner still needs to happen. It's only 2:30. You carry the week's groceries home on foot, in 2 paper bags, balanced 1 on each hip. A family of 4 eats roughly 30 pounds of food a week, and you are wearing all 30 of them at this moment. The bags do not have handles. The handles arrive in the 1980s. You walk slowly, because if you walk fast, the seams give. Halfway home, you switch arms. You set the bags down on the curb for 1 breath. You pick them back up. The paper holds if you believe in it. This is the arrangement. Your refrigerator is 9 cubic feet. For context, the average American refrigerator today is 26 cubic feet, and people still complain there's nothing to eat. Yours fits what it fits, and what it doesn't fit goes into the cool dark of the cellar, or onto the back porch in winter, or just gets cooked immediately before it turns. Nothing waits. The fridge has no patience and no opinion about this. My. It simply runs out of room and stares at you. Every 2 weeks or so, the fridge also needs to be defrosted. This is not something that happens automatically. You put pans of hot water inside the freezer compartment and wait for the frost to melt into them, a process that takes 45 minutes to an hour and requires your presence the whole time, because the water pans need rotating and the drip towels need wringing out, and the whole operation has the energy of a very small and tedious disaster. The fridge doesn't apologize. It just frosts again. You put the groceries away. The celery goes in the crisper. The pot roast goes on the second shelf. The bread goes on the counter because there's no room for bread. You close the fridge door and turn around, and the kitchen is already asking what's for dinner. Dinner is not a casual arrangement. Tonight's version, and most versions, involves a roast, 2 or 3 vegetable sides, a starch, bread, and dessert. 60 to 90 minutes of active prep, hot stove, no air conditioning. It's July. The kitchen is 92 degrees. A 1954 university study found that 12% of American homes had any form of cooling, which means you and 88% of your neighbors are basically cooking inside a Dutch oven that also contains your family. A home cook named Ruth, apron already damp at the back, stands at the counter peeling potatoes with the focused expression of someone disarming something. The peelings curl into the basin in long, ribbon-thin, faintly elegant strips. She doesn't look up when her youngest comes in. She hands him a carrot and points back toward the door without breaking rhythm. The carrot works. He leaves. She keeps peeling. The tin can of bacon drippings sits on the back of the stove, warm and patient, like a family heirloom that happens to be fat. You use it instead of butter for frying because butter is for the table and fat is for the pan, and nothing in this kitchen gets wasted twice. The Crisco is on the counter for the dessert. The dessert is not optional. An 82% majority of housewives in 1955 prepared dessert 4 or more times a week, which means the remaining 18% were either very brave or had very understanding husbands. The pot roast goes in. The timer goes on. The timer is small, mechanical, and aggressively confident. It has already lied to you once this week, and you know this, and you check it anyway, and you set the backup in your head at a slightly different time, because the timer is the kind of appliance that requires a second opinion. By the time your husband's car turns into the driveway, the roast is resting, the potatoes are mashed, and the table is set. The bags from this morning are folded and kept in the drawer by the door. You'll need them again next Thursday. You have 3 children. The 1950 average is 3.1, and you are within rounding distance of average. The youngest is 2, and currently underfoot. The middle is 6, and at school until 3 p.m. The oldest is 8, and reading a book on the kitchen floor 10 feet from the boiling water. They are simultaneously hungry, sticky, and asking a question whose answer would not satisfy anyone. You watch the youngest and the boiling water at the same time. You learn to cook with one eye on the stove and the other on the doorway. Dr. Spock's Baby and Childcare sells 750,000 copies a year throughout the decade. You own a copy. It sits on the counter between the Crisco tin and the dish rack, consulted with the frequency and urgency of a legal brief. Dr. Spock has opinions about nap schedules, feeding windows, and emotional availability. Dr. Spock does not do the dishes. The 2-year-old's name is Dennis. Dennis has recently discovered the cabinet under the sink and considers it a personal project. A calfer with braids would redirect him gently and with professional detachment. But there's no calfer. There's you, one hand on the pot handle, watching Dennis open the cabinet with the focused determination of a man who has found a loophole. You say his name. He pauses. He does not close the cabinet. He looks at you to confirm you're watching, and then continues. The childcare isn't separate from the cooking. It's concurrent. It's always concurrent. Pause. Hey, ma'am. You're folding laundry and fielding a question about why dogs can't vote. You're defrosting the fridge and narrating what you're doing so the 2-year-old doesn't get bored and disappear. You're rolling pie crust and supervising a homework argument from 8 feet away without turning around. because you know exactly what the silence after the argument sounds like, and it never means anything good. The math is worth pausing on. The average American work week in 1955 is 40.5 hours. Yours is between 52 and 56 hours of housework alone, before you add the childcare. With the children, studies of the era estimate 70 to 80 hours. The oldest, Carol, comes to the kitchen at 4:15 and asks what's for dinner. You tell her. She makes a face that suggests she's had this dinner before, which she has, which is the point. Carol returns to her book. The pot keeps boiling. Dennis has moved on from the cabinet and is now sitting on the linoleum, pressing a wooden spoon against the floor with both hands, methodically, like he's sealing something important. You're basically running a small logistics operation, which is less like a startup and more like a Costco distribution center, except the inventory is people and none of them hold still. School pickup at 3, snack by 3:30, homework by 4, dinner at 6 when your husband gets home, because dinner at 6 is when dinner is. The schedule isn't written down. It doesn't need to be. It runs in your body the way a route runs in a cab driver, automatic, load-bearing, and quietly exhausting. The kitchen is 90 degrees. The stove is going. Dennis has abandoned the spoon and is pulling himself upright against your leg, not because he needs help standing, but because you're there and warm and the closest thing to a fixed point in the room. You reach down and move him 18 inches to the left, out of the splash radius. He accepts this adjustment without complaint. He's 2. Carol calls from the other room that the 8-year-old took her pencil. The pot boils. You answer without turning around. You own a copy of Dr. Spock's Baby and Childcare, because everyone owns one. The book sells 750,000 copies a year through the 1950s, and yours has the spine cracked in 3 places. Spock is reassuring in tone. Spock is also clear about what is at stake. The mother's presence determines healthy development. The mother's attention shapes the future personality. The mother's failure becomes the child's neurosis. You read this. You put the book down. You make the tomato soup. The book sits on the kitchen counter between the salt shaker and the Crisco tin. It doesn't need to be open to be working. It's ambient. It radiates gently and continuously in the direction of your lower back. Spock isn't alone on that counter. There's also Better Homes and Gardens, Ladies' Home Journal, and a pamphlet from the pediatrician whose title is something like Your Child's First 5 Years. The pamphlet has underlines in it. You did the underlining. The 3 children you are statistically likely to have, 3.1, technically, though nobody has explained which parent contributes the 1/10, require constant and calibrated attention. Not just physical attention. Developmental attention. You're not just feeding Dennis. You're shaping Dennis' capacity for emotional regulation in late adulthood. The soup is a formative event. The soup had better be warm. A neighbour, Barbara Kloss, stops by on Thursday afternoons and reads the same passages you've read. She sets her copy on your table, open to the same chapter, dog-eared at the same page. She adjusts her cardigan, looks at the paragraph about maternal separation anxiety, and says nothing. You offer her coffee. She accepts. A hados? The percolator gurgles its small wet sentence every 9 seconds until it's ready. The thing about Spock is that he's kind about it. He doesn't say you're failing. Arbeit doppel pol bite, PBBD. He says, the mother is the environment. The distinction isn't doing much work, but the tone is very pleasant, and yet you log the hours. 52 to 56 hours a week on the house itself. Add childcare and you're at 70 to 80. A standard American work week in 1953 is 40.5 hours, which is the paid kind. The kind that comes with a check. The kind you don't have. The gap between those 2 numbers is basically a second full-time job that also requires you to be emotionally present and wearing a clean dress. By 1957, doctors are writing 36 million Milltown prescriptions a year, aimed mostly at women, managing households exactly like yours. Time magazine calls Milltown the don't give a damn pills, which is the most honest product description in pharmaceutical history, and also not a line that appears in Dr. Spock. You don't take Milltown, or maybe you do, on Thursdays, before the marketing trip. The book doesn't cover that chapter. Spock will sell 50 million copies before anyone formally reconsiders the premise. You won't be there for the reconsideration. You're here now, with the cracked spine and the warm soup, and Dennis pulling at the hem of your dress with both hands, which Spock says is a sign of healthy attachment. You've planned the week's meals on Sunday night with a pencil on the back of an envelope while the rest of the house is sleeping. The plan must accommodate what's in the icebox, what's left in the pantry, what's in season, what the children will eat, what the husband prefers, what the budget allows, and what the Friday meatless rule requires. You write 7 dinners, you cross out 2. You write them again. The envelope is small enough that the handwriting becomes a code only you can read. The refrigerator is 9 cubic feet. It doesn't volunteer information. You open it, peer in, and make a series of assessments that would pass muster in a McKinsey consulting room. What's going soft? What needs using by Wednesday? What can stretch across 2 nights if you slice it thin enough and add enough gravy? The leftover pot roast from Thursday has opinions about its own future. You override them. The budget is the gating constraint. You have a weekly allowance, a fixed number your husband hands you, usually in cash, sometimes in the same breath as a reminder not to overspend. Every cent is accounted for. There's no discretionary category. There's no line item for something I wanted. It's basically a corporate expense report, except the CFO eats at your table and the quarterly review happens every Friday when he checks the grocery receipts. You do the math in your head and then on the envelope, because the math in your head is not wrong, but the envelope confirms it. Meat is the expensive item. Ground beef is 70 cents a pound. Chuck roast stretches further. Chicken on a Tuesday means the bones become stock by Wednesday, which means Thursday's soup is already paid for. Nothing is wasted. The word leftover doesn't mean failed dinner. It means planned ahead. Eleanor Orville, 2 houses down, keeps a proper spiral notebook for this, colour-coded. Weekly and monthly columns. She brings it up occasionally, not unkindly in the way people mention a better method while standing inside your method. You've considered the notebook. The envelope is already there. The children are asleep. The husband is asleep. The house is producing its nighttime sounds. The refrigerator cycling on with a low hum. The furnace ticking. A floorboard in the hallway that announces nothing because nobody's walking on it. The pencil scratches. You finish the list. You fold the envelope in half. You put it under the sugar bowl where it'll catch the morning light and remind you to defrost the chicken before noon. The pencil goes back in the junk drawer. The kitchen is quiet in the way kitchens are quiet after a long day and before a longer one. You don't cross anything else out. The week is decided. You defrost the freezer compartment about every 12 days, because if you wait longer than 12 days, the frost grows thick enough to seal the door. The freezer is a small cabinet inside the top of the refrigerator, perhaps the size of a hat box. You empty its contents into a bucket of ice. You set pans of hot water on the inside shelves. Then you wait, with a towel, while the ice slumps off the walls in slow wet sheets. The whole operation runs 45 minutes to an hour. The refrigerator itself is 9 to 12 cubic feet. For context, a modern Sub-Zero holds 22. Your refrigerator holds 4 days of food for 4 people if you pack it with the focused intensity of someone playing competitive Tetris. The freezer compartment holds approximately 1 casserole, half a bag of peas, and whatever optimism you had at the butcher on Thursday. The frost doesn't ask permission. It simply accumulates, a slow, white, faintly fungal fur spreading across the interior walls, with the quiet determination of a house guest who's decided not to leave. By day 10, the ice cube trays have fused to the shelf. By day 12, you can hear the door seal straining. The freezer has opinions about schedules. and its opinion is that your schedule should accommodate its schedule. A woman named Dolores sets her pans on the shelves, then stands in the kitchen doorway with the towel over her shoulder, watching the drip. She's wearing her house dress. She's already ironed. The pan closest to the back gives a small, satisfied, faintly smug hiss. Dolores doesn't look impressed. She's done this 11 times this year, and it's only November. Meanwhile, the bucket of rescued food sits on the counter, a stick of butter pressing against a paper-wrapped pork chop, a jar of something frozen solid that may be chicken stock or maybe the juice from something you'd rather not name. You'll know when it thaws. Warsprov? Maybe. The automatic defrost feature won't be standard on refrigerators until the early 1960s, which is roughly the same timeline as the Roomba, in the sense that both represent someone eventually deciding that maybe a human being shouldn't have to do this particular thing by hand. Until then, you do it by hand, every 12 days, with a towel, in a kitchen that's already 78 degrees before 9 in the morning. The water collects at the bottom of the freezer compartment and runs toward the drain tray. The drain tray fills up. You empty the drain tray. The ice pan on the left shelf slides and you catch it. You recenter it. The ice pan on the right shelf does not slide, which makes you trust it less. Once the walls are clear, you wipe them down with a cloth, dry the interior, and reload. The casserole goes back in first, then the peas, then whatever the jar is. You close the door. The seal catches cleanly. You mark the date on the inside of the cabinet door in pencil. 12 days from now, you'll do this again. The pencil mark is already faint from the last time, and the time before that, you start dinner in August anyway. 12% of American homes have any kind of air conditioning in 1950, and yours is not in that 12%, and the kitchen is at 92 degrees Fahrenheit by the time the oven goes on. You move the standing fan from the living room to the doorway, where it pushes hot air at you slightly faster. You crack the kitchen window. You tie back your hair. You start the green beans. The oven door stays open for the rest of the hour. The pot roast went in at 4. It needs 2 hours minimum, which means the kitchen reaches its full potential by 5:30, which is exactly when the children arrive looking for something to eat. You hand them crackers without turning around. The crackers are a stalling tactic. Everyone understands this. The kitchen, by now, smells like several decisions layered on top of each other. Pot roast, scorched onion, and the faint metallic note of a fan that has been on for 6 hours. Underneath all of it is the warm, human smell of 3 children who have been outside since lunch. On the counter, a tin can of bacon drippings, saved from every breakfast since Tuesday, sitting next to the stove like a small devoted appliance. You use it to start the green beans. You use it for the pan sauce. You'd use it for the dessert if the dessert weren't a pie, which it is, because it's Thursday, and Thursday has always been pie. The drippings can has opinions about flavour. Strong opinions. They're not wrong. A word on the stove. It's a gas range. It doesn't light itself. You strike a match, hold it to the burner, and wait for the soft blue pop that means, yes, we're doing this. The match situation is the original version of a Keurig, except the single-serve option is a fireball near your fingers. You do this 4 times tonight, once for each burner, once for the oven pilot, and you'll do it again tomorrow, and the match tin is always slightly more empty than you expect. A 1955 microwave cost the equivalent of $14,600 today. So you boil the potatoes on the stove. You've always boiled them on the stove. The potatoes don't know they're expensive to replace. Nora, 3 houses down, has the same kitchen layout, the same fan position, the same tin of drippings, and has apparently solved the heat problem by simply not moving quickly. She stirs her sauce with the deliberate pace of someone who has made a philosophical decision about summer. Her green beans take 30 minutes. They're still perfectly done. This information is annoying. 82% of housewives prepare dessert 4 or more times a week, according to a 1955 Ladies' Home Journal survey, which means the oven, the same oven currently raising the kitchen to temperatures that would concern a lifeguard, is also baking something tonight. The pie is apple. The crust is from scratch because Pillsbury's refrigerated dough isn't available until 1957, and even then, some women treat the can like it's evidence of a character flaw. You roll the crust on the counter. The counter is warm. The dough knows. Dinner takes 60 to 90 minutes of active preparation. The roast, 2 vegetable sides, potatoes, bread reheated in the same oven, and the pie cooling on the windowsill where the fan can't reach it. You've walked, per the University of Connecticut's generous 1954 estimate, roughly 10 miles today inside and around this house. Most of those miles end in this kitchen. The kitchen is the size of a Levittown kitchen, which is to say, it's efficient. Which is to say there isn't a square foot that isn't doing something. You pivot between the stove and the sink, like a bartender who only serves one customer, and also that customer didn't thank you. At 6 o'clock, you set the table. At 6:15, everyone sits down. At 6:16, someone asks if there's ketchup. There is ketchup. There has always been ketchup. You knew about the ketchup. You start dinner at 4:30 p.m. The clock is the schedule today. Pot roast goes in at 4:45 if it's pot roast. Meatloaf goes in at 5 if it's meatloaf. Chicken goes on at 5:15. The 2 vegetable sides need 15 minutes each, staggered. The starch, potatoes, rice, noodles, runs alongside the meat. The bread comes out of the bread box and goes on a plate with butter, 3 timers, 4 burners, and a husband whose arrival is itself a timer. The husband walks in at 6. Everything has to be hot. Everything has to be on the table at the same moment. This is where the 1950s kitchen operates less like a domestic space and more like a flight departure board. You're running 4 separate timelines simultaneously, none of which share a clock, in a room with no exhaust fan and a stove that's been going since 4:45. The potatoes don't care that the green beans just went in. The roast has its own opinion about doneness, and it isn't sharing that opinion until you cut into it. Your neighbour Patrice has a system she describes as the mental map. She traces the sequence in the air with one finger while standing at her counter, pointing at invisible dishes in the order they need attention, as if conducting an orchestra that only she can hear. It works for her. It might work for you. You've been doing it anyway without a name for it for 3 years. The dessert is already made. This is non-negotiable. A 1955 Ladies' Home Journal survey found that 82% of housewives prepared dessert 4 or more times a week, which sounds like a charming statistic until you remember that it's a job requirement with no additional compensation, and the performance review is whatever face your husband makes at the table. You've made a pie. The pie made itself, technically in the sense that you made it this morning before the children woke up, which is a little like saying a Broadway show runs itself because the rehearsals are done. The children are somewhere. 3 of them probably in decreasing order of manageability. The youngest has been quiet for 11 minutes. Quiet is not a good sign. Quiet is an investigative opportunity that you don't currently have time to take. The gravy goes on at 5:45. Gravy doesn't wait. Gravy is not the kind of sauce that accepts an apology. You're whisking with one hand, adjusting the heat on the green beans with the other, and someone has just opened the back door and let in a dog that doesn't belong here. The dog heads directly for the corner near the stove with the specific confidence of an animal that has done this before. By 5:55, the plates are warming on the back burner. This is a real technique from the era and not a metaphor. Cold plates kill a hot dinner, and a killed dinner is a failed dinner, and a failed dinner is a conversation that starts with what happened to thee and doesn't end cleanly. You've warmed the plates. The plates are ready. The plates are the one thing in this kitchen that's cooperating fully. At 5:58, you take off the apron. You check your hair in the window reflection. The dress is pressed. The lipstick is from this morning, but it'll hold. This is the part that doesn't show up in the labour economics studies. The 2-minute transition from line cook to hostess, which is basically method acting except the audience is your family and the opening night is every night. At 6 o'clock, the front door opens. Everything is hot. Everything is on the table. The green beans are slightly overcooked because of the dog, but nobody will say so. You also make a dessert. A 1955 Ladies' Home Journal survey of Midwestern housewives reported that 82% prepared dessert 4 or more nights a week, which means dessert is not a treat in this house. It's a feature of the meal, like salt. The standard rotation is pie, cake, cobbler pudding, and jello salad with fruit suspended in it. You start the dessert before the dinner because the dessert needs to set or cool. You time it backward from when the husband walks in the door. The jello mould deserves its own paragraph. You've dissolved the powder in boiling water, stirred in the cold, poured the whole thing into a ring mould, and suspended canned fruit cocktail inside it in a pattern that suggests intention. It's been chilling since noon. It will wobble out onto a plate at dinner with the confidence of something that has no idea what it is. Fruit suspended in gelatin is not a salad. The jello mould does not know this. Pie is the other option, which takes longer. The crust requires cold butter cut into flour with a pastry cutter, then pressed, then rested, then rolled. Betty Crocker's picture cookbook gives you a full-page illustration of the correct lattice technique, which is the architectural digest of things no one will look at for more than 4 seconds. You fill it with apples or cherries or whatever the greengrocer had on Thursday. It bakes while the roast rests. The kitchen smells extraordinary. You do not have time to notice. Cake is Tuesday's dessert and Saturday's dessert. Pillsbury's annual bake-off, launched in 1949 with a $50,000 prize, pulls over 100,000 entries a year from women in kitchens just like yours. That's basically the Great British Bake Off, except the contestants are exhausted, the tent is a 90-degree kitchen with no air conditioning, and the prize is a station wagon you're not allowed to drive alone on weekdays. Dorothy, who lives 2 doors down, enters the Bake Off every single year. She removes her entry from the oven with the focused stillness of a surgeon closing. She sets it on the rack, steps back, and folds the dish towel over her left arm like a maitre d' waiting for a verdict that hasn't arrived yet. The cake is perfect. Dorothy knows it's perfect. She enters anyway. Pudding is the weeknight shortcut. You make it from scratch on the stovetop, not from a box, because boxed pudding mixes exist but feel like admitting something, stirring constantly for 12 minutes so it doesn't scorch. 12 minutes of continuous stirring at the end of a day you started at 5:45 in the morning is the kind of task that turns a person philosophical. The pudding doesn't care. It thickens on its own schedule. The dessert goes on the table after the main course is cleared, which means you stand up again, carry plates, and return with the thing that's been setting since noon or cooling since 4. The family eats it. The husband says it's good or doesn't say anything, which means the same thing. You've already catalogued what went slightly wrong. The crust was a fraction too thick on the left side. The jello didn't unmold quite cleanly. In the ongoing internal audit that has no external reviewer and no end date, you wash the mold while the family finishes. You wipe the rim of the pie plate. You note in your head, without writing it down, that tomorrow is cobbler, which means stewed apples in the morning between the laundry and the lunch. The hand crank beater goes back in its drawer. The drawer sticks. You bump it with your hip the way you always do. It closes. You wash dishes 3 times a day. Because there is no dishwasher, fewer than 5% of American homes have one in 1950, and yours is among the 95. After breakfast, after lunch, after dinner, the same sink fills with the same water at the same temperature. The water is 140 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to redden the skin of the back of your hand within 30 seconds. You use ivory bar soap. You scrub. You rinse. You dry with a cotton towel pinned to the wall. The morning sink is the worst one. Breakfast leaves a particular kind of wreckage. a percolator with coffee oils baked into the glass, a cast iron skillet holding the ghost of yesterday's bacon fat, and plates with egg yolk dried to the consistency of construction adhesive. The egg yolk doesn't negotiate. You soak it for 5 minutes, which is not enough, then scrub for another 5, which is barely enough. The percolator gets a separate treatment with a brush on a long handle, because the opening is exactly too narrow for a human hand. The cast iron never fully goes into the water, because you've been told the water will ruin it. So you wipe it down with a rag in a ritual that has no formal name, but takes about 4 minutes, and is technically its own task. The lunch dishes are faster, fewer people, smaller plates, but they still need doing, and the window for doing them is the gap between when you clear the table and when the children need something again, which is a window of approximately 12 minutes. You've gotten good at 12 minutes. The dinner sink is the long one. After pot roast and 3 sides and whatever Dorothy brought out of the oven for dessert, a pudding, a pie, a cake that required its own bowl, the stack is architectural. The water has to be refreshed halfway through because it cools, and cold soapy water is useless, and so you boil another pot while still washing with the first pot's remnants, like some kind of thermal relay race no one signed up for. Your hands are pink by the time you're done. Not painful, just visibly, persistently pink, the way hands look after they've been somewhere they shouldn't have been for an extended period. A dermatologist in 1955 would call this an occupational consequence. You call it Tuesday. The ivory bar soap is important. It's not doing you any favours. No moisturiser, no pH balance, none of the things that a bottle of Mrs. Mayor's dish soap would offer you 70 years from now, with a picture of a lavender farm on the label. Ivory is soap in the way that a brick is a building material. It works by existing and being rubbed on things. The bar shrinks across the week and develops a grey film around the edges that you replace on Saturdays. The old bar goes under the sink. You will use the old bar for something else. The old bar knows this. The triangle is stove to sink to table, sink to stove to table, table to sink to stove. It's a tight loop. You've worn a slight impression into the linoleum between the sink and the refrigerator, which is less dramatic than it sounds, but more real than you'd like. The triangle has no end state. It simply pauses between meals. Lorraine Vaughn, who lives 3 houses down, has one of the new automatic dishwashers, a hot point, cream-coloured, roughly the size of a small altar. She mentions it without mentioning it, which is a specific skill. The hot point costs around $350, which in 1953 is about 2 months of household income, and requires its own plumbing connection and takes 45 minutes to run a cycle, and is not actually faster than washing by hand if you count the loading and unloading and the re-washing of the items it didn't fully clean. Lorraine knows all of this. She bought it anyway. The hot point sits in her kitchen like a minor deity. Nobody touches it without permission. You are doing all of this in a dress. Specifically, a house dress, which is a category of garment designed for housework but still required to look composed enough that a neighbour dropping by would not be alarmed. You are also wearing nylons, because Good Housekeeping and Better Homes and Gardens have decided that bare legs are unkempt, and McCall's has a circulation of 4 million in 1954, and the pictures in McCall's are clear about the rules. The shoes have heels. The heels are low. They are still heels. Let's talk about the nylons. They cost between 69 cents and $1.50 a pair, which sounds reasonable until you factor in that you're wearing them while scrubbing tile grout with Ajax on your hands and knees, wringing hot laundry through rubber rollers, and reaching into a 140-degree dish sink 3 times a day. A single snag on the wringer's metal frame and the nylon is gone, not damaged. Gone. The drawer has spares. The drawer always has spares, which is the closest thing to a maintenance budget you're allowed to operate. A neighbour named Carol comes by on a Tuesday around 10:30 in the morning. She's wearing a shirtwaist dress with a belted waist, her hair set from the weekend salon visit, lipstick applied before she left the house. You are also wearing a shirtwaist dress. You also have lipstick on. You put it on at 6:15, between the percolator and the eggs, because the photographs in McCall's do not show a woman whose lipstick isn't on. Carol accepts coffee. Neither of you mentions that you are both dressed like you're about to attend a light function, and one of you has been mopping a floor since 8. The house dress is not casual wear. It has darts. It has a collar. It is structured, belted, and quietly humiliating to anyone who would prefer to scrub a floor in pajamas. It suggests effort without announcing ambition, which is the Goldilocks zone of 1950s domestic presentation, the women's magazine version of business casual, except the business is a full-time unpaid operation, and the casual part is load-bearing fiction. Diane von Furstenberg's wrap dress won't exist for another 20 years. You're managing structure without it. The heels add approximately 2 inches and subtract approximately 40% of your practical range of motion on a ladder. The step stool in the kitchen has 3 rungs. The top shelf of the pantry requires the top rung. The top rung in low heels is a calculated risk you've been calculating since Tuesday. You do it anyway because the house dress has a certain posture built into it, and that posture doesn't negotiate with flat shoes. There's a logic to it if you're a women's magazine editor in 1954. The home is your workplace. The workplace has a dress code. The dress code reflects on your husband's income, your neighborhood standards, and your own self-respect, which McCall's and Ladies' Home Journal have helpfully defined for you in approximately 400 pages a month. What the logic doesn't account for is lard. Specifically, a cast-iron skillet at 7 a.m. And what happens when it disagrees with a collar? You keep an apron for exactly this reason. The apron is the one concession. It is cheerful. It has a ruffle. It covers the dress from the waist down and does absolutely nothing for the collar, which is on its own out here. You set your hair the night before in pin curls, sitting at the vanity with a cup of bobby pins beside the lamp. You section. You twist. You pin flat against the scalp. Then you tie a thin silk net over the whole arrangement and you go to bed. In the morning you take the pins out and the curls fall into a set. Once a week you visit the salon for a wash and set, which costs $1.50 in 1955 and is considered a non-negotiable expense, the way rent is. The salon appointment is the only hour of the week where someone does something for you. A woman named Dottie, who's been doing hair since before your firstborn was born, drapes a nylon cape over your shoulders and says nothing meaningful for 45 minutes. It's the closest thing you'll get to a spa day. The spa day doesn't exist yet, and when it eventually exists, it'll cost 11 times more and come with a cucumber. The set has to last the week. This is the entire logic of the pin curl system. The salon gives you the shape and the nightly curl maintenance preserves it. You sleep carefully, not fully, not sprawled. You sleep like someone transporting a cake across a long distance. The net keeps the curls compressed. The pillow, if you're careless, does not. Let's talk about what the hair is actually for. It's not for you. It's for the door. The neighbor drops in at 10 a.m. and your hand goes to the back of your head before you cross the hallway. The husband walks in at 5:30 and you check the hall mirror on the way to greet him. The church pew at 9 on Sunday is 3 rows in front of Mrs. Patterson, who notices things. You stand over a pot of boiling water in an apron that says something cheerful about cooking, and the curls hold their shape exactly the way Dottie set them on Tuesday morning. A bobby pin costs almost nothing. Over the course of a week, you will lose roughly 1/3 of them. They migrate. They're in the sofa cushions, in the baby's vicinity, under the lip of the stove, where nothing retrievable ever goes. You buy more. The bobby pin is the 1950s version of a printer ink cartridge, small, essential, and mysteriously always running out. Dottie sets the rollers tight, tighter than is strictly comfortable. You sit under the hood dryer, which sounds like a small aeroplane that can't decide what it's doing. Other women sit beside you under their own hoods. Nobody speaks. The heat is considerable. You each hold a magazine and read nothing. This is technically the quietest room you'll enter all week, if you don't count the inside of a hot car in July, which doesn't count. The $1.50, that's $17 in today's terms, which isn't nothing when the weekly grocery budget for a family of 4 is $8 and some change. You enter the figure in the household ledger, between groceries and the children's school shoes, in the small hand you've used since the war. You don't underline it. You don't flag it. The line goes in like rent goes in, like the milkman goes in. Your husband, when he reviews the book on Sunday, runs a finger down the column and stops at nothing. At home, the vanity mirror has a slight lean to it. Whoever hung it was optimistic about the angle. You do your best. The bobby pins go in. The net goes on. You turn the lamp off. The curls will hold. Probably. You manage the household on an allowance. The husband earns the income. The husband decides the allowance. The allowance arrives once a week in cash, in an envelope, on the kitchen table on Friday night. The amount is fixed. It covers groceries, household supplies, children's incidentals, and your own personal expenses, which are the last item and the smallest. You account for the spending. He doesn't always ask. He sometimes asks. The accounting is done either way in a small notebook in the drawer near the icebox. The median household income in 1950 is around $3,300 a year. That's roughly $40,000 in today's money, which sounds manageable until you realize you don't have access to it. The weekly allowance is your operational budget. There's no second budget. There's no discretionary fund. There's no category called things I wanted. The notebook is small, spiral bound. Yep. It lives in the drawer under the dish towels because that's the drawer closest to where you stand. You write the amounts in pencil because sometimes you erase, not to cheat, just to reconcile. The notebook is functionally a corporate expense report, except the CFO reviews it over pot roast, and the audit has no appeals process. Now the bank. You don't have an account. You have access to the account, which is different. The way that having a key to an office isn't the same as having an office. If you need a checking account in your own name, you need your husband's signature. If you want a credit card, you need your husband's signature. This isn't a technicality buried in the fine print. It's federal banking practice, and it stays federal banking practice until 1974. That's not a typo. Barbara down the street keeps her envelope money in a coffee tin on the shelf above the washer. The tin is small, dented, and faintly mutinous. She tips it slightly forward when she adds to it and slightly back when she takes from it, as if the tin requires a formal request. She doesn't mention the tin. Nobody mentions the tin. The tin is not a secret exactly. It's more like a private opinion expressed in aluminum. The salon costs $1.50 to $2.50 a week. That comes out of the allowance. Everything comes out of the allowance. The Ijax, the Crisco, the children's shoes, the aspirin. You do the arithmetic before you spend, not after. The envelope teaches you to do the arithmetic before. Spending on yourself past a certain threshold requires a conversation. The conversation has a specific shape. You describe the need, you cite the cost, you wait. He may say yes, immediately. He may say he'll think about it. He may ask why you need it, when the one you have seems fine. The one you have does not seem fine. You don't say that. By 1955, a new automatic washing machine runs $300 to $450. That's the equivalent of nearly $5,000 today. The automatic washer is a single purchase item requiring spousal approval, which is basically a mortgage application, except the collateral is your back and the interest rate is how many more Mondays you want to spend feeding sheets through rubber rollers by hand. Most women keep feeding the sheets. The allowance doesn't grow automatically. It doesn't have a cost of living adjustment. Groceries go up. The envelope stays the same, and you find the difference somewhere in the column marked Children's Incidentals, which was always a soft number anyway. You are managing a household budget with no leverage, no line of credit, and no category for error. The notebook closes. The envelope is empty by Wednesday usually, sometimes Tuesday. The arithmetic was correct. The amount was the problem, but the amount isn't a discussion you're having tonight. You cannot open a checking account in your own name. The bank requires your husband's co-signature on the application, and this is not a regional quirk. It's federal banking practice in 1955. You cannot apply for a credit card alone either. The Equal Credit Opportunity Act, which will eventually make this illegal, will not pass until 1974, which is 19 years from where you are standing. The bank teller is friendly. He calls you Mrs. He asks how the children are. He still cannot give you the form. The mortgage on the house is in his name. The car loan, if there is a car loan, is in his name. The utility accounts list him first, then you, in parentheses, like a footnote the bill is not sure it needs. You exist in the financial record the way a middle initial exists, present, acknowledged, not the point. Here's what you can do. You can spend the allowance. You can manage the envelope marked groceries and the one marked household sundries, which is a category invented by someone who needed a polite word for everything. You keep the notebook. You present the notebook. The notebook is the closest thing you have to a financial identity. A woman named Doris Beaumont stands at a counter in a Columbus, Ohio branch of Huntington National Bank in 1957, trying to open a savings account for her children's school clothes. She's already filled out her half of the form. She's written her name in good cursive. The teller, whose name tag says Gerald, slides the form back across the counter. Gerald does this gently. Gerald has done this before. The savings account needs Raymond's signature. Raymond is at work. Raymond will be at work for 6 more hours. The school clothes need to be purchased before Saturday, because Saturday is when the good sizes go. Doris folds the form into her purse and walks back out into the parking lot. She doesn't have the car. She walked here. The practical effect of this system is that every financial decision above the level of a bag of flour runs through one person, and that person is not you. Medical bills, appliance purchases, school tuition deposits, repair estimates. You can gather all of this information, track it, organize it, present it clearly with context and a recommendation, which is basically a McKinsey consulting deck, except the client is your husband and the retainer is dinner, and then you wait. The waiting isn't dramatic. It's not a confrontation, it's just that the refrigerator needs replacing, and the repairman's estimate is sitting on the kitchen table, and Raymond will look at it when he looks at it. The estimate has been on the table for 11 days. The refrigerator is still running, technically, the way a person can be technically fine after something goes wrong. It's fine. It hums. It's louder than it used to be, and the freezer compartment doesn't quite close flush anymore. But it's fine. You have 19 years left. That's the math. 1974 is when the form changes, when a bank will legally be required to hand it to you without asking who your husband is first. 19 years from 1955 is a very long time to wait for paperwork. Gerald at Huntington National will probably be retired by then. The refrigerator will definitely be gone. It's Sunday, and the roast went into the oven at 9:15 a.m. Before the family left for the 10 service. You set it at 325 degrees, because you'll be gone for 2 hours and it needs to be done when you walk back through the door, not before, not after. You sit in the pew, you sing the hymns, you shake the pastor's hand at the door, you walk home. The roast is exactly where you left it. You take off the heels and you finish the gravy. The Sunday roast isn't optional. It isn't even really a meal. It's a structural element of the week, load-bearing in the same way the front door is load-bearing. Pot roast or a bone-in shoulder, or a chicken that you trust on Saturday evening with the quiet focus of a surgical resident who is also wearing pin curls and nylons. The accompaniments are already staged. Potatoes peeled and resting in cold water since before breakfast. Shadio, hamanakodoes since before breakfast. Carrots cut. A pan of dinner rolls sitting under a damp cloth on the counter, rising while you were at church, doing their work without you, which is more than can be said for anyone else in the house. The rolls are warm, patient, and quietly competent, basically the only employees in this house who don't require supervision. Your neighbour Linda Prescott makes her gravy from the drippings in the pan, plus a flour slurry she whisks with the brisk efficiency of someone who has been betrayed by lumps before. She whisks standing up, still in her good dress, one eye on the dining room table to confirm the children haven't moved the centerpiece. They have. They always have. She puts it back without comment. Sunday dinner isn't just Sunday dinner. Have too well. Suoforal. It's the weekly audit. The tablecloth is ironed. The good plates are out. The centerpiece is small, formal, and slightly defensive about being a centerpiece. Your husband's colleague from the firm, or your husband's brother, or your husband's mother is at the table, and the pot roast is the message you've been composing since Thursday's marketing trip. It carries the weight of a performance review. You serve, you sit last. You get up twice during the meal, once for the bread, once for something the children need that they couldn't have gotten themselves but chose not to. The roast is good. Nobody says it's good. It's supposed to be good. Saying so would be like complimenting someone on successfully arriving at a destination. The dishes after Sunday dinner are a separate category of dishes. There are the everyday dishes, which you wash in water hot enough to redden your hands twice a day. Every day with bar soap and no dishwasher, because only 12% of homes have one. Then there are the Sunday dishes, the good plates, the gravy boat, the platter that came from your husband's mother and would like to return to your husband's mother every time you touch it, washed by hand, dried by hand, stacked by hand. By 2 in the afternoon the kitchen is clean and the children are napping, and there is, technically, a quiet hour. This is the closest thing on the weekly schedule to free time. It lasts until someone wakes up, or the percolator needs attention, or someone thinks of tomorrow, and the Monday laundry waiting like a sentient backlog at the bottom of the hamper. The roast pan soaks in the sink. The good tablecloth goes back in the drawer. The heels are already in the closet. Monday starts at 6. You are hosting 6 people for dinner on Saturday. The husband's promotion at the office depends partly on this dinner, not officially, but in the way these things actually work. The menu is planned. The tablecloth is ironed. The silverware is real silver, which means it tarnishes, which means you polished it Friday afternoon. The candles are out. The flowers are arranged. The children are upstairs and have been instructed to stay upstairs. You answer the door. You smile. The preparation started Thursday. The roast needed sourcing from the butcher, not the A&P. The butcher. Because the butcher's cut signals something about who you are and what kind of household this is. You carried it home along with the greengrocer bag and the bakery box, all of it in your arms without a car, which is basically the world's least glamorous same-day delivery service, except you're also wearing heels and your hair is set. Friday, you cleaned the dining room, polished the good silver with a flannel cloth and a tin of Wright's silver cream that smells like chalk and quiet desperation, and ironed the tablecloth twice because the first press left a faint crease near the centre where everyone will definitely look. The tablecloth has opinions about pressure and timing. You accommodate them both. Saturday morning is for baking. You make a layer cake from scratch, because store-bought cake at a dinner party like this would be noticed, not mentioned. Noticed. The difference between those two things is the entire architecture of this evening. The roast goes in at 2. By 4, the kitchen is 90 degrees and climbing, which is standard for a summer Saturday with no air conditioning, a gas oven running for 6 hours, and 4 burners managing the vegetables, the potatoes, the bread rolls warming in foil, and a saucepan of something that isn't quite done yet. Your neighbour Dorothy Haas stops by at 4:15 to drop off a borrowed pie dish and stands in your kitchen doorway for 3 minutes making light conversation while you stir two things simultaneously and mentally adjust the gravy timeline. She means well. The gravy does not care. The guests arrive at 6:30. Your husband takes their coats. You appear from the kitchen doorway, composed, wearing the navy dress with the fitted waist, not the house dress, obviously, with your hair set from Friday night, rolled and pinned under the net while you slept, which is the sleep equivalent of assembling IKEA furniture on your head and hoping it holds until morning. It held. It always holds. Dinner is served at 7, pot roast, roasted potatoes, green beans with butter, creamed corn rolls, and the layer cake waiting in the kitchen under a glass dome. You sit at the table, you eat approximately 40% of your food because the other 60% of your attention is managing the water glasses, the serving dishes, and the conversation's ambient temperature, which requires monitoring in a way that doesn't look like monitoring. The men talk about the office. The wives ask about recipes. Someone compliments the tablecloth. You say thank you in a way that doesn't reveal the second ironing. By 9:30, the guests are gone. The children are asleep. The good dishes are soaking, and your husband is in the living room reading the paper. The kitchen still smells like roast fat and cake sugar. You wash the silver by hand in the deep sink, not the dishwasher, there isn't one, and dry each piece individually with the good cloth so it doesn't spot. The candles burned unevenly on one side. You make a note to rotate them next time. His promotion, for what it's worth, comes through the following Tuesday. It's Saturday, which means it's baking day. Pillsbury's annual bake-off began in 1949 and has already drawn 100,000 recipe entries from American housewives, which is to say, baking is taken seriously in this country in this decade. You make a loaf of white bread, a pan of dinner rolls, a fruit pie, and a coffee cake for Sunday morning. The flour bag is £25 and lives in the pantry. The kitchen is dusted in a fine pale film by 11 a.m. The dough is rising on the counter under a clean dish towel. The breads are crusty. The pies are blistered. And the cakes are the kind of cakes that arrive at a church basement with a small handwritten card. The bake-off prize is $50,000, which is roughly 15 years of your household allowance. 100,000 women entered last year. The judges are men in suits. You did not enter, but your neighbour, Connie Brubaker, did, and she's been speaking about it in a particular tone ever since. The tone is quiet. The tone has sharp edges. The bread, first. It isn't bread yet. It's a commitment. White bread in 1953 requires proofing the yeast, mixing and kneading for 8 to 10 minutes by hand, a first rise of an hour, punching down, a second rise, shaping, a third rise, and then 40 minutes in the oven. The total elapsed time from flour bag to sliced loaf is roughly 4 hours. The fruit pie goes in after the bread comes out. The oven doesn't have a digital display. It has a dial and a history of mild dishonesty. You know from experience that the number on the dial and the actual temperature inside are in a long-running disagreement. You compensate. The pie compensates. The crust comes out fine. A woman named Vera Schlenk from 3 streets over has won the church auxiliary baking competition 4 years running. She brings her coffee cake to every event wrapped in wax paper with a small card that reads, simply, Vera, not her last name, just Vera. The cake doesn't need a last name. It has a reputation. The coffee cake is for Sunday. Sunday's coffee cake is not optional. Sunday's coffee cake is the reason Sunday morning exists. You slice it before church, cover it loosely, and leave it on the counter as proof of the week's work, a soft-yested document of every hour you spent in this kitchen, itemized in cinnamon and brown sugar. Betty Crocker's picture cookbook, sitting on your counter with a flower handprint on page 94, sold over 1 million copies, and schedules your Saturday in 30-minute increments. It has opinions about your time. Strong ones. By noon, the kitchen smells like the inside of something warm and forgiving, yeast and brown sugar layered over melted butter, with the faint cinnamon ghost of last week's coffee cake still in the curtains. The bread is cooling on a rack. The rolls are done. The pie is set. The coffee cake is in. Your apron has flour on it from the first batch and a butter smear from the second, and you look like someone who's been operating heavy equipment, which, to be fair, you have. A 25-pound flour bag is not a gentle object. It doesn't open cooperatively. It opens on its own terms. You won't enter the bake-off. The entry form is on the counter. It's been on the counter for 2 weeks. The prize is real money, the kind of money that would be yours, in your name, with no husband's signature required, which for another 21 years will remain an exception to nearly every other financial transaction available to you. The form stays on the counter. The bread is already rising. You have a small brown bottle on the bedside table. The label says Milltown, manufactured by Wallace Laboratories, prescribed by Dr. Fridney. Henderson on Maple Avenue, taken once daily as needed. By 1957, doctors are writing 36 million prescriptions a year for Milltown, and the great majority are for women, and Time magazine has nicknamed the pill the Don't Give a Damn pill. You take one with a glass of water. You set the alarm for 5:30. You turn off the light. You will be back at the percolator in 7 hours. Milltown isn't unusual. It's furniture. Achoo. It sits next to the glass of water and the book you've been on page 47 of since March. Dr. Henderson prescribed it during a Tuesday appointment, where you described feeling tired, and he nodded in the way that meant he'd already written the prescription before you finished the sentence. The drug arrived in 1955, and it spread through middle-class neighbourhoods the way a good casserole recipe does, neighbour to neighbour, with quiet enthusiasm and no questions asked. Wallace Laboratories called it a tranquilizer. The women taking it called it nothing. You don't name furniture. By 1957, Milltown is the most prescribed drug in American history. The medication is a soft grey wool that arrives about 40 minutes after dinner. You don't feel better so much as you feel less specific. The kitchen is still there. The ironing board is still set up in the hallway. It's always set up in the hallway, but both of these facts feel temporarily negotiable. Nancy Pfeiffer down the block keeps hers in her apron pocket. She sets it on the counter next to the Crisco while she makes biscuits on Thursday morning, then puts it back. The biscuits are excellent. Excellent. So, nobody connects these two facts. The bottle is for everything. It's for the 52 to 56 hours of housework per week. It's for the additional 20 hours of childcare woven between those hours, which don't count separately because the children are just present, which is somehow both less than a job and more than a job simultaneously. It's for the 6 to 8 hours of weekly ironing, including the handkerchiefs, including the pillowcases, including the small cotton undershirts belonging to a 4-year-old who will immediately sit in something. The bottle doesn't fix any of this. It doesn't fix the 90-degree kitchen in August, or the manual defrost, or the 3 separate shopping trips on Thursday, or the dinner that needs to be on the table at 6 regardless of whether anything inside you wants to cook. It just adjusts the volume. The tasks remain. The calendar remains. Monday is still laundry. Tuesday is still mending. Wednesday is still the 19-pound Hoover on hands and knees. You'll be up again before the house stirs. The percolator will need filling. The bacon grease tin sits beside the stove, where it always sits, patient and undemanding as a very small god. The eggs are in the refrigerator. The alarm is set. The bottle is already working. You close your eyes. The house is quiet in the specific way houses are quiet when they're only resting, not done. And there you have it. 70 hours, 6 days, 1 sink, 1 Hoover, 1 tin of bacon drippings, and a percolator that wants attention before you do. You ironed the handkerchiefs. You waxed the linoleum on your knees. You fed wet shirts through rubber rollers one at a time. You carried 30 pounds of groceries home in heels because the car was at the office. You watched dinner and a toddler, and the boiling water all at once, and you made dessert anyway, because Tuesday said so. Somewhere in the middle of all that, you set your hair the night before in pin curls, signed nothing in your own name at the bank, and kept a small brown bottle from Wallace Laboratories on the nightstand, labelled, helpfully, the Don't Give a Damn pill. The kitchen is closed. The ironing board is folded for the first time since the Truman administration. The Hoover, finally, has been allowed to sleep. Sleep tight.